Hi, welcome. You're at Trail Tales. Woo! This is our 6th Trail Tales of the year and our last one. So if this is your first one, this is it. If this is your 6th one, thanks for buying season tickets. I'm Haley. I'm with Alaska Trails. We're a 501c3 nonprofit based here in Anchorage that operates statewide. We build, maintain, advocate for trails. We do these events every week with a partner, and our wonderful partner tonight is the Chugach Park Fund. Just a couple orders of business to start the night. One, I want to say thank you to the Anchorage Museum. They are our partner in this every month. They host us here and allow us to have these events in this lovely auditorium. So big thanks to the Anchorage Museum. A lot of clappers tonight. A few other orders of business. If you need the restroom, it is out in the hallway to the right of the double doors you walked in. In the event of an emergency, you should leave the way you came in. And if you have a cell phone that is making noise or capable of making noise, please stop it. Turn it off. Put it on airplane mode, whatever you need. The order of operations for tonight is that we are going to have an introduction from someone from the Chugach Park Fund. We're going to have a series of storytellers. We've got a special treat tonight. We've got some live poetry from a local poet, kind of akin to the Arctic Entries musical interludes. We've got some Chugach adjacent poetry tonight for as a treat to finish off our last Trail Tales of the year. So yeah, I just want to thank everyone for being here. We really appreciate the community support of trails and our trail partners. I'm going to take a quick moment to dive into a couple of things. If you care about trails, which I think a lot of people here tonight might, there are some things coming up that I'm sure you are aware of, but I'm here to remind you of. One is Anchorage is working on its recreational trails plan, the first in decades. And that comment period ends March 31st. So the next time you're drinking coffee and instead of doom scrolling through the news, I think you should go to the Anchorage Recreational Trails Plan website and submit comments. They're looking for substantive comments about the prioritization of projects. So if you care about trails in Anchorage, that's a great thing to do. You probably have heard we have a local election coming up in April. There's a couple bonds on the ballots. So if you want to support trails and parks, there are a couple opportunities to do that in the upcoming election in April. And other ways to support trails, we are launching our volunteer event schedule soon. So if you want to get out and get dirty, we will have 25 plus events on Saturdays and some weekdays for everywhere from Chugach National Forest up to Denali State Park this coming summer. So you can come out and dig in the dirt and lop some evil alders with us this coming summer. So keep an eye out for that, and we would love to have you join us. My co-MC tonight is John Quinley, who is a longtime public servant and lover of public lands and one of the longtime advisors of the Chugach Park Fund. John has been working to improve public lands longer than I've been alive, we confirmed tonight. He's a longtime Park Service employee. So please welcome John to the stage. He's going to introduce our first speakers and tell you about Chugach Park Fund.
That's okay. I'm not mentioning anybody else's age who's on the stage. So, Walt Reed is our first speaker, and he's going to tell you some more things about the Chugach Park Fund, as well as probably some of his adventures. Walt arrived in Alaska from Pennsylvania in the summer of 1980, almost immediately discovering the wonders of Chugach State Park. During his first summer, he had the opportunity to climb Wolverine and O'Malley Peaks, hike Crow Pass Trail. And since then, he's visited the park frequently over the years on skiing, hiking, and snowshoe adventures. He's been working with the Chugach Park Fund for about 3 years and joined because he believes in the mission, which he'll tell you more about, and likes helping to stimulate improvements to the trails that we all love. Walt spent most of his career in Alaska in municipal governments, serving as a city manager, borough manager, and city planner. Also served most recently as an administrator for the Prince William Sound Regional Citizens Advisory Council, working to prevent oil spills in Prince William Sound. He's now retired. Everybody can groan about that. Getting up into the park as much as possible. Walt.
Thank you, John. First of all, thanks to Alaska Trails for putting this event on, and thanks for everything you do. And thanks to all of you for coming out tonight on St. Patrick's Day. Much appreciated. I'm sure you got plans for after this talk. So anyway, I'm here tonight to talk a little bit, to tell the story about the Chugach Park Fund. The Chugach Park Fund was formed in 2016, about 10 years ago now. And the idea was to enable people of all ages and all of abilities to get out into the park and enjoy the splendors of Chugach State Park. The idea was for citizens like us to be able to increase our stewardship for the park through partnerships and philanthropy, fundraising, and volunteerism. So the group has worked hard to do that for the last 10 years. We also raise money to try to increase investments in the park, especially in trails and other infrastructure, by applying for grants, securing corporate sponsorships, and fundraising generally. So there's 7 of us now that are fund advisors for the Chugach Park Fund. We're organized under the Alaska Community Foundation. They do most of the administrative work for us, fortunately. And over the last 10 years, the Park Fund has raised approximately $900,000 money that's gone directly into the trails that you guys love every year. And if you're not, thank you. And if you're not familiar with the Chugach Park Fund, I'm sure you are familiar with some of the projects that we've worked on. Some of the bigger ones, this last summer, you may have noticed the major improvements that took place on the Willywaw Lakes Trail. The prior summer, the big project that we worked on was the trail that goes to Hidden Lake and Ship Creek, or the Ship Pass. There's been many other projects, Little O'Malley, the South Fork of Eagle River, a lot of drainage work on the trail up to Wolverine and things like that. So I hope you've noticed those, and I hope you've appreciated those. Thank you. So I wanted to acknowledge some of our partners, because without some of these partners, we couldn't do what we do. One of the biggest ones is the Alaska Community Foundation. I mentioned earlier that we are organized under them. They're our nonprofit, and they do a lot of administrative work for us. They're terrific to work with, and we're really lucky to have them. So a shout out to them. If you get a chance, I think there's 8 of them here tonight. So if you get a chance to thank them, please do that. They do a wonderful job. Also, Alaska Trails has been a partner for the last decade. Most of the projects that we do, Alaska Trails is involved one way or another. They do our volunteer events. We have 6 or 7 every year. They recruit the volunteers for us, and they supervise the volunteers. They provide them with training and the equipment that they need. All we have to do is raise the money. So we raise the money, they do the work, so it's wonderful. Also, the Chugach State Park staff and the superintendents, especially the last 2 that have been around since I've been here, they've been wonderful to work with, great lines of communication. They're very supportive on many levels, and they help us pick projects. We make sure that we do the projects correctly, that they're consistent with the park's trails plan, and that they're consistent with the priorities that the park has for dealing with their deferred maintenance backlog. So thanks to them. Also, the city of Anchorage is becoming increasingly important to what we do. Last year we got a grant, the Mayor's Community Grant, to work on 3 volunteer projects. If you hiked on the Middle Fork Trail, you probably noticed quite a bit of brushing that took place on that trail, and that's thanks to that grant. So thanks to the mayor for that kind of support. Also, Haley mentioned the bond sale that's coming up. The Chugach State Park Access Service Area has become really important, and the work that folks are doing through that program coincides nicely with what we do. And I know the superintendent's here tonight, and he would probably tell you that it doesn't make a lot of sense to fix up trails and make them really nice and invite people to come and use them if you can't get to them, if access is tough. You know, the road is not in good shape, there's not enough parking. Maybe the neighbors are a little bit grumpy about your being there in the first place. So some of these projects dovetail nicely with what we're doing. And you know, most of you know about Canyon Road and the work that's going to happen there. The bond sale this coming April is particularly important. It's at Basher, at the Basher Trailhead, which is really needed. It's kind of difficult there's not too many good access points to the park from the northeast part of town, and this is one of the major ones. And so this bond sale, if it passes, will greatly expand the parking area and do some work on the trail that leads down to the Lost Cabin Trail, which is a trail. I'll talk about that a little bit more in a few minutes. That's one of our major projects for this summer coming up. So thanks to all of our partners. Also, I just want to thank all the donors. Many of you are in the room tonight. We have many, many donors, and it's really gratifying. Some want to remain anonymous. Some are recurring donors every year. We can't name them all here, but we try to send a personalized thank you note by email when you do make a donation. We also try to thank you in the monthly newsletter when that comes out. So you've probably seen that if you get that. We also have a lot of support, corporate support from organizations, civic organizations, and corporate. And I'm going to, if you'll bear with me, I'm going to read some of them because I think it's important to acknowledge them when we have a crowd like this. This year already, we have one big project that I'm going to describe and 6 volunteer projects. Already, ConocoPhillips Alaska, Athletic Brewing, 2 for the Trails, the Aaron K. Johnson Memorial Fund, and Matson have already committed funds for those projects for this year. So if you get a chance to say thank you to, if you know employees, let them know about it. Last year, for the big Willie Wall Lakes project that we had, and our 6 volunteer projects, we had support from the Rasmussen Foundation, ConocoPhillips Alaska, Matson, the Carr Foundation, Bass Pro Shops and Cabela Outdoor Fund, the Atwood Foundation, Alyeska Pipeline Service Company, Anchorage Trail Care Fund, the Aaron K. Johnson Memorial Fund, Athletic Brewing 2 for the Trails, Chugach Eagle River Foundation, Beartooth Theater Pub and Grill, the Anchorage Mayor's Community Grant, the Atwood Foundation, and Trail Care, Jim and Sally Burkholder. So if you get a chance, please thank all those people. So here's probably what you want to know. What are the projects for this year? What's going on? We've got several big ones and 6 small ones, 6 volunteer projects that are one-day events, and Alaska Trails will help us with that. 2 of the trails, there's two different phases for the Powerline Pass Trail, and this is the trail that runs. It's set aside and shielded from the transmission lines. And if you've been on that trail lately, you know the brush is really encroaching on the tread, and it gets kind of hard if you're a skier or a biker in particular. So there's going to be a lot of brushing work that happens this year, and the 2 phases hopefully will cover from the intersection of Blueberry Hollow all the way down to White Spruce. So hopefully we'll get a lot of work done there. There's also going to be brushing on the Muktuk Marston Trail. The first mile from the parking lot at Arctic Valley is getting a little bit overgrown, and so there'll be some work done there. Let's see, Panorama Trail, if you're familiar with that, also needs some brushing. It's getting a little bit overgrown. And 2 of our most popular trails, the Sunnyside Flat Top Trail and Little O'Malley, very popular, but you can probably see that there's some wear and tear that's happening there. So there's some work that's going to be on, drainage issues and reestablishing the tread and places where the trail is starting to slough a little bit. So hopefully, if you've got the time and the ability, please volunteer for those projects. They're a lot of fun, and you'll meet good people and people of like mind. The 2 big projects are Lost Cabin. We call it the Lost Cabin Wolverine Ski Bowl Trail, or Wolverine Bowl Ski Trail. It's a trail that you can access from either Prospect Heights or Basher, And if you've been on it, you know it's a wonderful little trail in the valley. It's beautiful in the wintertime. In the summertime, it can be quite a quagmire. So there's going to be a new bridge, lots of drainage work done, some rerouting of trail there, and hopefully it's going to be a much more pleasant experience year-round. And this is important because this trail, you can get from there directly up to the Basher project that we were talking earlier about. So these two projects go hand in hand, and we hope we can do them together. The other bigger project for this year, and this one for those of you like me that are fans of the Falls Creek Trail, we've contracted with a company that's going to do 5 days of brushing work on Falls Creek in that middle section between, you know what I'm talking about. And we'll see how far we get with that. And after that, there's going to be an assessment done on the tread just to see it's sloughing off in some places that people have noticed. It may need to be rerouted in some other places. So we'll see where that goes. But we look forward to that. So I know what's on your mind. How do we get involved, Walt? What can we do? Well, here's what you can do. You can sign up for our newsletter if you're not already on there. There's a sign-up sheet at our table in the back. You'll get a monthly newsletter. It'll keep you up to speed on what's going on with the trails and what projects we're working on and if we're making progress or not and how you can get involved. So that's one thing you can do. You can visit our table too. We've got some good displays there of projects that we have worked on and intend to work on this summer. You should vote. Hallie mentioned, voting. It's Proposition 8. It's on the ballot, so do whatever you can to get yourself up to speed on what that project's all about, and if you get a chance to vote, please do so. There are some signs out there that you can sign up for and take home with you if you want to put a sign in your yard, a Vote Yes sign, of course. So let's see, what did I miss? Oh, and volunteering. I mentioned that. If you have the time and the ability, and you want to volunteer, you do that by going to the Alaska Trails website. And I don't know if it's up yet, but that's where you go. If you want to know the dates for those projects and you want to sign up, that's where you go. So finally, one of the best ways you can do is contribute. And I know that here comes the pitch, right? So I know you're all getting hammered these days. It's political season. Everybody's running for office. Lots of nonprofits are having a hard time in this economic environment, and there's a lot of good causes out there. But this one, I think, is close to my heart because you can see directly where your money's going. You're going to the trails the money's going to the trails that you love, that you use all the time, and you can see the results yourself. So it's really easy to give if you're able to do that. Our newsletter has a link there that you can hit, and it takes you right to our website. It's bing, bing. It's just like 2 clicks. There's also a donate button on the newsletter. There's QR codes that we have outside. On some of our flyers, informational flyers have a QR code, and I think it's even on some of the signposts now in the park. So you just scan that, 2 steps, and you're there. And then if you're like me, if you're really old-fashioned, you can write a check, so you write a check, and you make it out to the Alaska Community Foundation, and you can mail it or you can deliver it. You get to say hi to Jen if you do that, which is worth it. And you just put in the memorandum line for the Chugach Park Fund. So thanks for your attention, and that's all I got. And now we can get on to why you're really here, hear these stories. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, Walt. I think, I don't know if it was totally clear, but all the advisors for the Chugach Park Fund are volunteers. So all the folks who are working to raise money to do projects in the park, it's all a labor of love. They're donating their time to make it happen. So those folks are pretty rad. We are going to get into the stories, and our first storyteller tonight is Mary Beth Kepner, who apparently spent 9 years chasing white-collar criminals in Philadelphia with the FBI, and that was just not exciting enough. So in 2000, she convinced her husband that moving to Alaska for adventure was a reasonable life choice. Mary Beth has also climbed a few hills here and there, including Denali, Mont Blanc, Cayambe, Cotopaxi, Aconcagua, Mount Rainier, Mount Kenya, and Kilimanjaro. When she's not climbing something tall or hiking somewhere remote, she's mountain biking, motorcycling, pack rafting, or kayaking, almost any activity that requires a helmet, a paddle, or strong will. Mary Beth's story is titled My Journey to Everest, a story of cancer, courage, and climbing. Please welcome Mary Beth.
I never felt more alive than when I stood atop Denali on a beautiful sunny day in late June. But let me start at the beginning. I've always needed challenges in my life, whether they be mental, physical, or emotional. So when I retired, I needed something else. And that something else turned out to be climbing mountains. So my first post-retirement adventure was a through hike on the Appalachian Trail. And that offered lots of challenges, steep summits. I had to navigate through a wildfire, rain, and more rain. Well, that trail ended atop Mount Katahdin in Maine, which is the high point for the state of Maine. And a new dream there emerged, and that was to reach the high point of every state. So I said, oh, that's no big deal. I've got this. And then I realized that included a few hills like Mount Hood, Mount Rainier, Denali, and I was like, I had no mountaineering experience. So I wasn't getting any younger, and I thought I better tackle those mountains first. Oh, oops, I forgot where I was. I'm sorry about that. So I knew I needed to come up with a new plan, but of course, nothing ever goes according to plan. So I took my first mountaineering course, and right afterwards, I was diagnosed with ovarian cancer. Well, this felt like a kick in the gut, and my climbing plans were now in limbo. With cancer, I lost my hair, I lost the feeling in my feet, I lost my sense of taste, and I felt like I had lost control of my life. But this wasn't a good mindset for me. I knew I needed to tackle cancer like I tackled mountains, with determination and passion. So this wasn't about loss, this was about a new summit, and I needed a new plan. So I did some pretty unorthodox things through my treatments. One of them was I laid upside down in the recliner for the chemo infusions. And I did this with the hope that the drugs wouldn't settle in my feet and cause neuropathy, but would settle in my abdomen. I fasted for 4 days prior to each treatment with the hope that that would weaken the cancer cells and make it more susceptible to the drugs. I also made a commitment to hike every day, no matter how crappy I felt. Well, these daily hikes took me over Hemlock Knob in the Chugach State Park. And on top of the knob, I could see in the distance Denali, and I felt its constant pull. And it's like I wanted to climb that mountain. So at the end of December, with my cancer treatments successful and my cancer summit behind me, I started the serious training for Denali. And this included carrying a 50-pound pack up Near Point, Wolverine, Bird Ridge, and Flat Top. And it involved hiking with snowshoes on and carrying a weighted sled. And I felt like I was getting stronger and fitter every day. And by the time June rolled around, I thought I was physically and mentally ready for the next summit, and that was Denali. So I traveled to Talkeetna and met my team, which were an awesome group of people. And we had some incredible fun on that mountain. We had beach parties in the snow. We did headstands at 11,000 feet. We carried a hula hoop up the mountain and hula hooped at every camp, including the summit. So with the help of cookie dough, we made it, the whole team made it to the summit on that sunny day. Well, getting to the top of Denali meant a lot more to me than just summiting. It meant that I had overcome cancer and that I had fulfilled my dream. But the story doesn't end there. So I got back to the hangar in Talkeetna, and I get a call from my cancer doctor congratulating me on the climb. And she was also addicted to mountains, by the way. She congratulated me on the climb and said, "Do you want to be a part of an expedition to Everest to raise awareness and funds for ovarian cancer?" Well, I was in a euphoria from the climb, and I think she caught me at a weak moment. And I said yes. So a new summit was on the horizon. 10 months later, 6 survivors, 4 doctors, and 14 caregivers traveled to Nepal. While most of the team would hike to base camp, myself and Jess, another ovarian cancer survivor, planned to climb the mountain. Well, the bonds quickly formed on the team through deep conversations, laughter, TikTok videos, and a daily team chant. But just reaching base camp turned out to be a huge feat, and 3 of our members had to be helicoptered off the mountain. Then the excitement of reaching base camp was severely impacted when we learned that 3 of our Sherpa had died in the Khumbu icefall the previous day. So this was a somber ending to our trek. And I said an emotional farewell to my team and my husband. And before my husband left, I made him a promise that I would return home. Well, that was a pretty weighty promise because 2023 ended up being the most deadly year on Everest. So with the team gone, now I had to start the acclimatization process to summit the mountain. And that involves going through that Khumbu icefall and on to Camp 1 and Camp 2. Well, as you can imagine, the Khumbu icefall is a pretty intimidating place with huge columns of ice that have to be scaled, deep, bottomless crevasses that have to be crossed on narrow ladders while wearing giant mountaineering boots with crampons on. I successfully made it to Camp 2, but when I returned to base camp, a respiratory illness I had had a few weeks earlier turned into a raging infection. So my summit bid was delayed. But the first weather window appeared, and Jess started her climb. And 5 days later, she became the first ovarian cancer survivor to summit Everest. My chance would come a few days later. So in the middle of the night, with the moon high in the sky, my Sherpa and I, as tradition dictates, asked the mountain deity for safe passage, and we began our climb. Well, several hours into the climb, I reached a 30-foot wall of ice that I had climbed a couple weeks earlier with minimal effort. But this time, I struggled to get to the top. It was at this point that I realized that my strength and stamina, the toll that the illness had taken on my strength and stamina. So I continued to climb, but that promise that I made to my husband continued to nag at me. So about an hour later, I reached the agonizing decision to turn around. So I was about an hour into my descent when I heard this thunderous noise from above, and I turned back and looked back up into the icefall, and it turned out a giant serac had collapsed. But I didn't give it a whole lot of thought at the time, and I continued down. Well, the next week, I talked to some of my teammates that I had passed while I was descending that night. And they told me that that serac collapse had actually been right in the path of the climb, and that they believed, because I was ahead of them at the time, that my Sherpa and I could have easily been buried in that serac collapse. So that day in the Khumbu icefall, I realized my summit wasn't about reaching the top of Everest. It was about choosing to live.
Thank you, Mary Beth. Mary Beth wants to thank everyone who helped her on her journey, her husband, family, friends, medical personnel, climbing and training buddies, and many others. Every summit she reached, whether on a mountain or her fight against cancer, it was never hers alone. She can only tell this story today because of their support and encouragement, and is eternally grateful. Mary Beth, thank you. Our next speaker is Carolyn Highland. Carolyn's a teacher and a writer living in Anchorage. Her work has appeared in Outside Magazine, Backcountry Magazine, The Ski Journal, The Ski Magazine, to name a few. Her book, Out Here, Wisdom from the Wilderness, was released in 2020, and her second book, The Full Range, Essays from a Life Outside, is slated for publication in October with Rocky Mountain Books. When she's not teaching fifth graders about metaphors and multiplication, there'll be a test later, you'll find her doing endurance sports in the mountains or devouring a good book with her cat, Spruce. And there's a copy of her book as a door prize, or you can order one through your local bookstore. Carolyn, welcome.
All right, this is going to be a lot less impressive than that, so just lower your expectations right now. My feet are soaked, and I've just watched my 6'1" partner, Andy, disappear into the brush in front of me, and I'm crying. Now, for context, this is not the first time that I've cried in the middle of a trail run, kind of a crier. But usually I'm crying tears of awe or elation at finishing a race or completing a run that's harder or longer than I'm used to. But right now, I'm crying because I'm pissed. Andy and I have lived in Anchorage for about a month at this point, and while both of us have spent time in Alaska doing different things, we haven't really done any trail running. So we're assuming it's going to be the same as running in the Sierra or the Rockies with just a couple of brown bears, right? Maybe the crying is making a little more sense now. So we started at Glen Alps Trailhead and are planning on doing the Long Lakes, Willowa Lakes loop from there. It should be about 20 miles, and right now we're about 8 miles in, and things have already felt more intense than we were expecting. We came down Middle Fork and around Rusty Point. It's been pretty brushy and wooded, and the paranoia is real. I've been checking over my shoulder every 2 seconds, feeling a little stressed. So I'm really looking forward to when the trail gets us to near point. I can see it now. There's going to be these beautiful, gentle switchbacks that just take us right up to the top, because that's what a trail is, right? They wouldn't make us go straight up the steepest part. That would be diabolical. So, much to my delight, I spend the next 30 minutes, hands on my quads, huffing and puffing, going straight up the gut of this thing. There is no running happening whatsoever. And I get to the top and am overcome with the amnesia that often comes with endurance efforts, right? I blacked out the last hour of suffering, and I'm just focused on the beautiful view. This is how nature swindles us into doing these things over and over again. We're at the top of Near Point, and we look out at the trail coming down the ridge in front of us. It's beautiful, a trail runner's dream, and I'm totally sure that the worst part of this day is behind us. So we take off down the trail, and we're headed into the Long Lakes Valley. And according to the map, the trail should cross the creek at the base of the valley. And we get to the creek, and there's no bridge. So Andy, Mr. Longlegs McGuire, just hops right across, keeps his feet dry, but not me, not with these puppies. So I am in knee-deep water immediately. My socks and shoes are completely soaked. But like usual, I'm sure that the hot summer sun is going to dry them out momentarily. When we get to the other side of the creek, the trail disintegrates. And this is our first experience with the egregious catfishing of Alaska trail maps. On the app, the lines look clear, well-defined, honest, reliable, good-looking even. But when we show up for the date, it's a sad excuse for a game trail living in its mom's basement. So we're looking around, no luck yet, and up the valley we see a couple coming down toward us, but they're on the side of the creek that we started on. So we're gonna have to cross back over. And this time, both of us get our feet wet. And the creek bed on the other side is steep, and he's scrambling up it, and then we are dropped into a veritable jungle of brush. He's a tall guy, and he is gone. And it's at this moment that I'm overcome with a wave of homesickness for running in the lower 48 so great, and an irritation at all of this route finding so strong that I start to cry. This isn't a trail. This isn't running. This is trash. Why did we even move here? The pity party is getting really good when Andy's keen eye for nature details saves the day. Doll sheep, he calls, pointing up at the slopes below Mount Kanoya. And I find it within myself to pull myself out of my misery and look up. And sure enough, 10 to 15 tiny little white dots on the hillside are right there. Doll sheep. It's easy in these moments of struggle to really zoom in on only what's in front of us. I've spent the last few minutes focusing on the discomfort of my wet feet and on the frustration of losing the trail, and my mind is looping these really unhelpful statistics about how far we have left to go and how slow we're moving. And I've kind of forgotten where we are. But looking up at the doll sheep, I remember that this is bigger than just what's happening to me in this moment, and that this situation and this valley are more complex than my complaining. All right, I'll keep going. So we bushwhack for a few more moments and are mercifully deposited into open tundra, where there is a faint but visible trail headed up the valley. I'm ready to finally make some moves and get some miles behind us, but Andy's doing this whole observing thing still. Cloudberries, he says. Cloudberries? Come on, is this a Roald Dahl book? Those can't be real. That's definitely not a thing. But sure enough, it actually is a thing, and they're growing all around our feet. We both drop to our knees and start popping the tiny orange globes into our mouths, and it feels like the Chugach has laid out an aid station just for us. And it's enough sustenance to give me the will to live and to keep going. So we continue up the valley, we make it to Long Lake, take a quick cold dip, and then continue up to the pass that's going to drop us into the Willowa Lakes Basin. And there's a couple of alpine lakes up at this pass, and behind one of them is unmistakably a rock glacier. This feels wild to us, so close to home. We're used to running in places where glaciers are a distant memory, and we're only a few miles from downtown Anchorage as the crow flies, and here's the geologic evidence right in front of us. We're stopped in awe for a few minutes just taking it all in. The trail as we come down into the Willowa Lakes Basin is delightfully runnable, and I start to feel the frustration of the first half of the day fade around the edges. Before we know it, we've made it to the car after 7 hours, which feels like a long time for this run of this distance. But I realized that while some of the slowing down had to do with crawling uphill and trying to dry my socks out and losing the trail completely, some of it also had to do with these incredible moments of awe connected to the flora and fauna of this particular place, things that couldn't have happened anywhere else. And while this is a flavor of trail running that I'm still not quite used to yet, it's something I think I want more of. And fortunately, the Chugach has plenty where that came from. Thank you.
Thanks, Carolyn. I feel like that was an endorsement and an indictment of our trails. Some of those trails you were on are better now than they were then. Thanks to the Chugach Park Fund. Some of them are still really bad. If you don't know what catfishing is, you never got to internet date. And congratulations. Look that term up when you get home. Great. All right. Our next speaker tonight is Casey Durand. He's a lifelong Alaskan, a self-employed contractor, and an outdoor wanderer who grew up exploring Chugach State Park and still considers it home. Casey travels across the state chasing projects and adventures, and he believes the Chugach backyard accessibility is Anchorage's greatest treasure, which is obviously true. Now a parent, he enjoys sharing fun, nostalgic trail stories and encouraging a new generation to care for the parks that raise them. Casey's speaking tonight about growing up in a culture of community parks and appreciation for public lands. Thanks, Casey.
I get nervous when I get loud. Can everyone hear me? Cool. You got it. With the recording? Okay. We're all here for the Chugach tonight. I'm an advocate for the park. I'm going to get emotional. I'm an advocate because that little 2-year-old girl back there, I want the park to be here for her and her generation. So I grew up above Fire Lake in the shadow of Mount Baldy. And when I say grew up, I mean part feral. It was a free-range childhood. My neighborhood didn't have fences. It just dissolved out into the park. And a lot of time was spent in the park. After school meant muddy boots and tree sap on everything. And at that point in time, there were no water bottles and performance gear. There was no GPS or Onyx to guide me. Just vibes, a vague sense of direction from a never-setting sun, and lots of misadventures along the way. You know, the park wasn't a destination over there. It was just where life happened. You know, I remember when Eagle River Road was a dirt road, and there were much fewer houses along it back then. In 1996, the opening of the Eagle River Nature Center, that was quite a sight to see. There were balloons and banners, there were speeches, there were volunteers. There were volunteers way too excited about chopping firewood, that's for sure. And as a kid, I didn't really realize I was watching something important. But I was watching a community come together and build the nature center and build the park around it. You know, as a kid, I didn't really realize just how important that was. I thought that's how parks work. People build them, people fix them, and people show up. And it felt like the community owned the place. Not literally, but more like someone's dad built that boardwalk, and they're going to tell you about it for the next 20 years. Back then, all the parks ran on what I call neighbor energy. Community parks programs. If you grew up here, you remember those. Planting flower beds and mowing the lawns at the ballpark. Local sports leagues, parents coaching, volunteers building trails, painting buildings, even plowing snow and picking up trash. It wasn't glamorous, but it was people with shovels, people with gloves, people with thermoses that definitely contained more than just coffee. And somewhere along the line, we quietly traded that model. Government grew, agencies professionalized, which made sense. But the side effect, we shifted from, these are our trails, let's take care of that. And it became, these are their trails, someone will take care of that. And these things I didn't really notice until I started walking the park again as a parent. The same valleys, ridges, and creeks, but new things stood out. Erosion channels where trail used to be, braided social trails spreading like spider webs, and signs held together with zip ties and optimism. And I had this thought, the park looks tired. Not broken or doomed, just tired. And I had this thought I needed to learn more. So I started asking questions, and what I learned surprised me. The state park has essentially no dedicated maintenance budget. Not reduced, not vetoed, just zero. And staffing levels haven't even remotely kept pace with the growth in users over the years. Which means every new trail user is amazing, but every new trail user is a tiny bit more wear. And that wear adds up. The park we love is being held together today by staff who care deeply and are incredibly, incredibly invested. There's a heroic amount of duct tape and a lot more emotional commitment. But there is a hopeful part here. The solution is not complicated. Big part of that is sitting in this room tonight. It's people coming together for the park. It's the same thing that built these places to begin with. People, hands, time, and caring. We don't need everyone to become a professional trail builder. We don't need everyone to join a board. We don't need everyone to have a passionate relationship with a Pulaski. We just need people to feel this is mine. Because when something feels like yours, you pick up trash. You respect the closures, and you teach your kids why we stay on the trail. You show up, and showing up changes everything. And here's something funny I've noticed about these big, wild places. They're wildly great at reunions. I can't count how many times I've been walking along and I run into someone I haven't seen in 15 or 20 years. And of course, immediately we say we should get coffee, which statistically we know isn't going to happen. But in a park this big, people who drifted apart in life keep colliding again in the woods. Sometimes that collision is with a younger self, a realization of the more simple times. And I love that because it feels symbolic. This place quietly pulls people back together, not just with each other, but with the land, with memory, and with who we used to be. I think about that feral kid version of me a lot, the mud on my pants and leaves in my hair. I was absolutely convinced I was a wilderness survival expert, especially with the snack strategy of, he'll find something out there. You know, that kid didn't know the word stewardship, but he lived it because he felt like he belonged. And belonging creates responsibility. Responsibility creates care. Care creates longevity. And it's a simple loop, and I think we can reconnect it. We're wildly lucky. Very few cities have a massive park wrapped around them. This town we call home is hugged by a huge piece of our public lands. It's not a weekend trip. It's not an hour away. It's our backyard. And some of us are going home to this tonight, and that's not normal. That's a gift. And gifts come with a quiet expectation that you take care of them. Not because you're told to, but because you love them. So here's my Trail Tales takeaway. If this park has ever given you peace, if it has ever given you adventure, if it has ever given your kid a muddy, happy childhood, you already have a relationship with it. And relationships are two-way streets. Maybe your next step is donating tonight, and maybe it's volunteering this year. Maybe it's telling a friend about a trail day. Maybe it's simply deciding I am part of this. Because the future of the state park isn't written by agencies. It's written by neighbors, by communities, and by people who decide the park that raised them is worth raising up in return.
Thank you. Thank you, Casey. Our next speaker, a poem, is Tonja Woelber. She arrived in Alaska in 1980, beginning of a lifelong love of mountains in all weathers, which is a good thing here. She's hiked and biked and skied all over Chugach Park, usually in the company of her husband, Mark, and their mountain poodle. Most of her poems are observational, celebrating the beauty and wonder of the natural world. Please welcome Tonja.
So I'm doing one poem now, one after the intermission, and one at the very end. This poem is in praise and celebration of something I'm sure you have all seen many times, which is crumholts, which are those little twisty trees at Glen Alps and everywhere else in the Chugach. So here's the poem, Crumholts. Bowed by wind, fashioned by storm, bent and sculpted into fantasy form, fierce, freezing blasts, clumps of deep snow, weld branches to ground, nothing to show but a dense roof of needles under empty white sky. Maze-like caverns, people pass by that shelter sleek ermines, foxes, white hares, stray dogs and tomtons, wolverine lairs. Even deformed by ice, snow, and sleet, these twisted green trees form havens of heat, protecting lost children, cold, stranded hikers, desperate lovers, and fat tire bikers. From blizzard and rain, wind chill and hail, white spruce and dwarf hemlock are friends of the trail.
Thanks to everybody who donated. Again, all donations are split between Chugach Park Fund and Alaska Trails tonight, so we really appreciate it. Your donations are gonna make trails happen in Chugach State Park. We have Tonja back to welcome us back to our storytelling portion of the evening with her next poem. So Tonja, please take it away.
Thanks, Haley. When I first met my husband, he had a book called Scats and Tracks. And I said to him, what is that about? And then when he told me, I said, who would read a book like that? And he said, you better learn this book because it really matters. So here is my poem about, well, not scats, but tracks. And it's called Palmer Creek Road. And Palmer Creek Road is in Hope. And of course, it's a true story. Palmer Creek Road. Boots crunch glittering crust. Thin streams gurgle beneath the snow. We only wanted to walk the dog. Nowhere special to go. Wolf tracks dent the snowy road. 4 pads, sharp claws, prowling from side to side, circling, slowing to pause. Moose hooves emerge from birch, hesitate, backtrack, seek a path. Signs of a scuffle, bloody fur, a careful, swift attack. We only thought to take a walk, to see the wind toss thin-limbed trees, never expected to see the signs of a wilderness ambush scheme.
If you've enjoyed Tonja's poetry tonight, she generously provided printed copies of her poems, including laminated ones that you can put in your backpack and bring with you. They're on the table outside the door. So thanks, Tonja. All right, I have the pleasure of introducing our next speaker, which is Pete Panarese. We have a couple of legends in the room tonight, including Pete. From 1972 to 1976, Pete was a soldier at J-Bear, a mountain and glacier training at Eklutna Glacier during the early days of Chugach State Park. Pete then worked for Alaska State Parks from 1976 to 2004. Serving as park ranger, then superintendent within Chugach State Park, and later as the deputy director of state parks until retiring in 2004. Over the decades, Pete has traveled extensively throughout Chugach State Park and survived numerous trips into the Alaska Range in Denali National Park. Pete has always been an advocate for the focused stewardship of parklands. Currently, Pete's a member of the board of Friends of Eagle River Nature Center and is a volunteer naturalist at the center. People call him the Beaver Whisperer, but only behind his back. Pete will tell a tale about a wonderful wildlife encounter he had while in the company of a special friend, another legend, Dick Griffith.
Just leave that, please. Yeah, I've been fortunate to be in Alaska for quite a while, and equally fortunate to be able to get here in 1972 with my wife, Sue. Now, I want to get right to the point, folks. Here we are. We come here 6 months in a row to enjoy this experience, this trail tale stuff. What's that all about? Well, I boiled it down to this. There's entertainment, there's camaraderie, and we all get together to celebrate our mutual desire to use the wildlands that are nearby us. But it boils down into memories of meaningful experiences. We all have these things that we've done with friends or by ourselves in the wilderness and enjoyed things that we always harbor in our brains, in our hearts. Tonight, I want to share one with you. Dick Griffith passed away this Christmas in his sleep at 98. Dick is an Alaska legend, and he will be celebrated over the course of the next several months by people who were much closer to him than I. But I had the lucky opportunity of meeting Dick way back before he was really becoming well known, although at the time he was still a very accomplished outdoorsman. So it works out that my wife Sue worked with Bunny Rodak and Izzy Griffith, Dick's first wife, at Providence Hospital. So I got to meet him the first time at the Providence Lab Christmas parties. And myself and Mike Rodak would sidle up to Dick. You know, we would stand on the side of the action and graze the food table and talk tales about what he had done. And he would always give us the business. Well, you park rangers, why are you doing this? Or why are you doing that? And we would have great exchange with him. And we knew that this guy was something else because his reputation would always precede him. By then, he had traversed the Brooks Range and done lots of adventures. He would mention something like the first descent of the Barranca del Cobra, whoosh, went right over our heads. We had no clue what he was talking about because we were the acolytes and Dick was the guru. He was the guy that we looked up to. But I traveled in different circles. Dick was a civil engineer, and I was a state park official. So he went his way, I went mine. I'd see him once a year maybe, or I'd encounter him in the park once in a while. He would come out of the woods, the apparition that he was, T-shirt, shorts, air horn, always with a white dog. So the years go by. And so I retire in 04, and I meet Dick at the Nature Center out in the back one afternoon, and I said, hey, Dick, can I give you a hand? And he says, yeah, Pete, I think we need to brush out the brush around Turbid Creek Bridge. And I was wondering if you could help me do that. I tell you what, I'll give you my lightweight saw, and you come over Crow Pass, and I'll meet you at the Turbid Creek, and we'll clear this mess up and spend the night at the Raven Creek cabin. And I says, oh, yeah, okay, Dick, we'll do that. So this is mid-fall, mid-October in 2005. I go over the pass, and I'm able to steal a night at the old beat-up cabin up there at Crow Pass that the Forest Service has. And I walk down to Turbid Creek. No big deal. I get the saw out. I trim up the brush and move it out of the way and sit down to take a break. And then I hear a saw in the distance, and Dick shows up just like he said he would. And we, exchange pleasantries. He checks out my work. I did okay. And we leave. We hike back down to the Raven Creek cabin, cross that old rickety bridge that is no longer in existence, and spend the night in the cabin. It's pleasant. Dick doesn't talk a lot. I did most of the talking, and I probably bored the hell out of him. But every once in a while, I'd ask him, hey, Dick, what are you seeing for wildlife these days? Ain't seeing nothing. Well, I don't see nothing no more. I can't understand what's going on with that. So I just let that pass. The next morning, we get up, take off on the old Crow Pass Trail it's not where it is now. It's on the other side of the river. So we're just meandering down the trail and nothing to really get excited about. We're not talking. We're just moving along. We come to a slough, and I look up, and there's a freaking brown bear right there, fishing away. It doesn't see us, doesn't have us. The bear's doing this, and there's creeks flashing out, grabbing a salmon, tearing it apart, and right behind it is a wolf. And I'm going, whoa, this is cool. From here to the camera, there's a brown bear, and there's a wolf behind him. And there's magpies going back and forth. And the bear is getting this late-run salmon, grab one, tear it apart, and then move to the next one. And the wolf was kind of picking up what was left. But the wolf spots us and starts arcing away from us. And so it's gone. It's across the river, and it's leaving. The bear doesn't have us. The bear's head is down. It's in the water, and it's fishing, splashing back and forth. And I looked at Dick, and here's Dick standing over there leaning on his hiking stick. And I look over to Dick, and I'm giving him this look at, and here comes this, what are we going to do? And he's just casually standing there. And finally, I'm just getting real nervous now. Here's this bear. It's closer, and it does not have us. It doesn't know we're there. The next thing I know, I just lose courage. I start jumping jacks. Hey, bear, hey, bear, hey, bear, which I've done often enough to know that this supposedly is going to work. The bear stands up, gives me the look. It's just dripping with water. Beautiful. Hits all fours and goes up over the embankment, and it's gone. And I look over to Dick, and he's just chill. And he's just standing there leaning on his hiking stick. And he goes, well, what do you think, Pete? I was going to pull a Treadwell? So I, kind of get myself, my composure back. And we pick up our gear, and we hike out to the nature center, cross the river, and have a wonderful time. But Dick was a person that was important. He gave freely of his time at the nature center. He was a major benefactor financially and time-wise. He was an original member, a founding member of the board of the Friends of Eagle River Nature Center. And he'll be sorely missed by all of us, those of us who knew him, because he was such a personality. And to be a person, 98 years old, and die in his sleep, I hope that happens to me one of these days. Thank you.
Thank you, Pete. Our next speaker is Dusty Eroh. Dusty spent the last 19 years exploring Alaska, and over that time he's followed many paths across the state, from shuttle bus driver in McCarthy to guide to outdoor gear designer. His passions for snowboarding, climbing, and mountain biking have taken him to wild places and introduced him to lifelong friends, including his spouse, Christina, who shares in the adventure. Dusty's story is about humility in the mountains along the Eklutna Traverse. Please welcome Dusty.
This thing on? Sweet. Also, for some reason, I kept thinking I had 15 minutes in my head, and we only have 7, so I'm going to abbreviate this a little bit. It was a long week. It's only Tuesday. But so before I get started, I want to tell you guys a little bit of an inside personality trait I have. Inadvertently, I tend to do things the hard way. And sometimes that works out for me, sometimes it doesn't. It's great for doing things like, I for some reason, I always take the hardline mountain biking. I like to take the hardline ice climbing, but other things, it doesn't work out so well. I don't know why it is, but that's just the way it is. Sorry, Christina. But that kind of takes me into the story. So I was in Alaska for about 3 years. I had been working as an apprentice guide up until Kepner, had a great season. I was like really gung-ho about becoming a mountain guide and doing all this stuff. While I was out there, the last course of the season, I met a gentleman, John, who we kind of hit it off, and he had aspirations of climbing Denali. So I realized he was from the Anchorage area, and we decided to get together after the season. I went back to school, we stayed in touch, and we talked to each other a little bit, and we're like, what should we do? He's like, well, I want to train. And I was like, well, I need a little bit more experience too. How about we do the Eklutna Traverse? And he's like, yeah, is it easy? I was like, I had some friends that I was guiding with. They said it was great. They did it in 24 hours. They called it a gentleman's outing. I was like, it sounds perfect. He's like, yeah, I'm on board. I was like, sweet. He's like, when can you do it? I'm like, well, I'm in school, but I got this chunk of time during winter break. How about that? And he's like, yeah, I think that works for me. So I also convinced another friend because it's easier to have a group of 3 out there. So my buddy Justin accompanies us, and he's also on winter break. So we're all set to go. Also, winter break coincides with December 21st, which in Alaska tends to be the darkest day of the year. But it didn't matter. We're all set. We were going to do this. We buffered ourselves because we were told we could do it in 24 hours, so we gave ourselves 4 days, plenty of time. So we're prepping for this. We're all psyched. We are trying to get our gear ready, and I'm on a split board. That's kind of what I've done all my exploring on. I just have mountaineering boots, and it always works out fine. My buddies aren't really skiers at the time, and they're like, what do I bring? And I'm like, well, 210 centimeter skis with Silverettas and mountaineering boots. That's what I was told to bring for all this stuff. If you guys have ever tried to ski in that gear, it is terrible. Like, you do not ski. It is meant to approach to a climb, leave it at the base of a climb, and then maybe not even pick them up on the way out. Just leave them there, walk back. So we're all set up with gear. My buddy John calls me. He's like, hey, which way do we go? And I'm like, well, it's the Eklutna Traverse. We start in Eklutna and we traverse over. He's like, okay, that's fine. Let's do it. Again, like I said, for some reason, the hard way, it tends to go uphill this direction all the way to the end and then down. And he's like, okay, you've been there? I was like, yeah, I've been out there a few times. Plus, I got this sweet map here, this Anchorage vicinity map. And there's a line on it with the trail. It's right there. And there's supposed to be some huts out there in case we need them. We won't need them, though. It's fine, And he's like, okay, cool. Well, I got a buddy that can give us a snow machine ride out to Serenity Falls. And I'm like, that's cheating, John. There's no way we're doing that. So next morning, we all depart. We're the only ones in the parking lot in Eklutna. We ski across the lake because fortunately it was a cold December that year, so the lake had actually frozen up. And we're all in pretty good spirits. We got these expedition packs on. We've got sleds. We're cruising. We're joking. We managed to get all the way up to the toe of the glacier. It's kind of getting a little dark at this point. It's probably like 2:30 in the afternoon. And we're like, maybe we should camp here. And I'm like, I was told it's just a walk-on. So, and there's a cabin. Worst case scenario, we just cruise up to the cabin at night. It's fine. So we start going. It's blue ice. There's not really any snow. So we just have crampons on. We're cruising around. And then since we punched right up the center, it starts getting into a little ice folly. And it's not bad. We still don't have any ropes on, but we're going. And then it's getting a little dark. So we all stop. We put some our headlamps on. And we're cruising. And the next thing I know, I'm actually have my ice axe out. I've got my crampons on, and I'm full swinging over my head, climbing these ice fins to get on top of these ridges. And I'm like, whoa, this is a lot of work. This sled's pulling me down. I get up there. I'm on these little fins. I'm like cruising around. I finally get over to this flat area where it starts to turn snow and a little bit benign. And I'm like, yes, we made it past the ice fall. And I look back. I'm like, what do you think, guys? And I cannot see any of them. And the only thing I see is these headlamps kind of going up, going around. I'm like, oh God, this is a bad situation. So I drop everything. I grab the rope. I grab my gear. I run back, and I see Justin on this small ice fin in the same position, and he's like, I can't get up. My sled's stuck. And I'm like, oh God. So I quick down climb. I unclip the sled. I help him get up. Then we both get the sled up and over. We move it into a safe spot where it's flat here, and we're just exhausted. And then John comes kind of bumbling around the corner. He's like, I took a different way up here. And we're like, oh God, this was almost a disaster. So we finally regroup. And we're like, okay, now it's getting a little snowy. It's flatter. Let's rope up just in case there's crevasses. So we rope up. We start traveling. It's getting dark again, or it's been dark. And I was like, yeah, it's fine. We'll just keep going. I mean, the map says there's a cabin here. How hard could it be to find? So we cruise for a few more hours, and at this point, we just give up. We're like, we're not finding anything. We're stopping right here. Set up camp. We're a little frazzled. It was a little edgy there. We get a little bit of sleep. We wake up the next morning. You know, we break camp before dawn. It probably was like 9:50 in the morning. And we start cruising up the glacier to the Whiteout Pass. And I'm like, this is it. Once we hit the pass, it's all downhill. So we get up there. It's hard to see in the strange light. And I'm expecting to cross this pass and go down. And I take like 2 steps down. I'm like, we went over the pass, guys. So it was just a small little step down. It's really nothing. I was expecting us to cruise, and we didn't. And we're going very slowly. And at this point, I'm like, okay, well, I know there's another hut somewhere out here. So we're going, and all of us are just like, you know, when you have that anticipation for something and it just goes away, we're like, we can't find this hut. Oh my God. And we're just about to get up, and when someone's headlight shines on something and it reflects, and we found the hut. So we're so pumped. We get in there, and it is probably the worst night's sleep we've ever had. It's so cold in there. The wind is drifting snow in, and we're like, whatever, we're inside. We're just like, it's going to be great. It's downhill from the start tomorrow. So we get up in the morning. We start going downhill. Remember the ski choice that I told you about? So let's add packs, sled, and a rope team together and try to ski down this slope to the Eagle Glacier. It was a disaster. It took us more effort going down, and all of us were so pumped when we were going to go back uphill. But we get to the Eagle Glacier, and my map has a split on the trail. And there's a hut on the one side. And I'm like, well, this doesn't make any sense. My buddy told me he went up over this Eagle Glacier. And why would we go to this hut and have to backtrack? I was like, nah, we'll skip the hut, guys. We're going to go up the Eagle Glacier. So we start going up the Eagle Glacier, and it's getting dark again. And we had full anticipation to make it up and over that day. Well, I was like, well, you know, maybe I was told there's a Nordic ski chalet hut thing up here. We start going. We didn't see that thing at all. And to this day, I still have never seen that. I don't believe it's actually there, but I'm sure it is. So we have another kind of tentative night camping, and wake up in the morning, and we're going to go over down to the trail. My buddies were like, yeah, there's a trail there. You can just cruise on the trail. I'm like, okay, sweet. I also didn't ask them which direction they went, first off. So we start cruising over to the edge of the Eagle Glacier towards our destination is Goat Ridge, if you guys are familiar with that area. And we all get there and we look down. And it's steep. There's runnels, there's rock ridges everywhere, and we not only have to go down, but we've got to traverse over to get to where we're supposed to be going. So I start down climbing, kicking steps in. We're grouped together. We're going down this thing, and we have to traverse as well. Then we start getting sketched out because it's like snow runnels, and we're like avalanche danger. So now we're spread out. But despite everything, I think it might have took us 5 hours to go 1 mile in that situation. We get to this ridge, and I'm like, yes, we are there. I'm looking down at this beautiful, powder-filled 30-degree slope. I can see the road out there. We are set. I put my snowboard together, I drop in, and the sled comes around and takes me out. And I'm like, okay, all right, I'll figure this out. So it took me a minute. I figured it out. I got down to a safe spot, and I was pretty pumped because this was the fastest we'd gone the whole trip. So I wave up to my buddies, and they're like, okay, sweet. So I'm like, this is great. We're going to be in Girdwood in like an hour. This is so good. And first guy drops in and just starts tomahawking as soon as the sled comes around. So it was like this the entire way down. Like if someone looked at the ski tracks, it was just like, what was this, a bear that was like coming down this thing? I don't know what's going on. Managed to get down there. It's dark. We're just headlamps on, bushwhacking to the road. And we get to the road, and I'm like, hey, John, where'd you guys ditch the car? He's like, well, chair 5. And I'm just like, what? He's like, well, yeah, he's like, you didn't want snow machine assistance, so I figured we were supposed to end in Girdwood. And I'm like, all right, fine. So we start skiing down the Crow Pass Road. because of the low snow year and it's Girdwood in December, they had an epic rain event that all turned to ice. So it was glare ice on the Crow Pass Road. We're trying to ski down this thing, and it's slightly off camber, and the sled's whipping around. It's like taking us out. We just gave up on skis, and we put crampons on, and we're just cramponing down the road. So we finally make it to Chair 5. We're exhausted, but we're also super happy we did this, and we're talking, and we're having this conversation, and I'm like, 24 hours, like, gentleman's outing. And I was like, oh, springtime. There's like so much daylight during this. It's crust season. And they just went the other way. And the trail that they told me was on there was actually a summer trail to go up, because usually people go up the Raven Head Wall and over. Totally unprepared, totally didn't get this. So we learned a huge lesson and got very, very humbled out there. So just because it's in your backyard doesn't mean that it's going to be easy. Just because somebody told you that it was super easy doesn't mean it's going to be easy for you, and you probably should ask a little more questions. But what we really learned is that if one person has a really bad idea and thinks it's a good idea, it's probably a really bad idea. If two people have the same bad idea that think it's a really good idea, it's also still probably a really bad idea. If 3 people have the same bad idea and think it's an excellent idea, at this point you're not going to change their mind, and you should just go try it, because it might work out. So, thank you.
Thanks, Dusty. I think the moral for me is that regardless of whether you're like hiking Flat Top, doing the Eklutna Traverse, traversing the Brooks Range, there is some jerk in Alaska who will call that a gentleman's outing. Like, regardless of the size, there's someone who's going to sandbag you. All right, our next speaker tonight is Robin Dublin. Robin moved to Alaska in 1994 for 5 months to complete work on her MS in environmental education and landed a dream job coordinating wildlife conservation education at the Alaska Department of Fish and Game, while also teaching outdoor courses at UAA. As a die-hard New Englander, she thought this, quote, Alaska thing was a phase, but like so many of us, it was a lifetime thing. Her other work here in Alaska has included leading a climate change education program with UAF, the Alaska Ocean Observing System, and the Alaska Sea Life Center, running the Alaska Botanic Garden, overseeing subsistence for ADF&G's southern region, and a short stint at McNeil River Game Sanctuary, hanging out with the bears. She's a strong park conservation and environmental education advocate, and is currently on the Chugach State Park Citizens Advisory Board. Now retired, Robin is lucky enough to hike into the Chugach from her doorstep with her wife, Hillary Morgan, and lightning bolt of a rescue dog, Anya. Do you remember the old TV show, The Shadow? I don't. The tagline was, "Who knows what evil lurks in the hearts of men? The shadow knows." In Robin's story, the tagline will be, "Who knows what stupidity lurks in the minds of 2 women on a winter night on the backside of Mount McHugh? The shadow knows." Not sure what this means? You're about to find out. Please welcome Robin.
Okay. My mom grew up in the 30s and 40s, and it was a radio show called The Shadow, and there was this tagline, and it was in a really scary voice, and it was, "The shadow knows." And when I was a kid, I would ask a lot of those like silly, stupid kid questions that kids ask, like, if you've got mint chocolate chip ice cream and it's green, and you've got mint chocolate chip ice cream and it's white, why does it taste the same? It tastes the same. Why is that? They're 2 different colors. And my mother would look at me with this funny look and say, "The shadow knows," and walk away. And I had no idea then, I was probably 8, she had no idea then that 20 years later, I would end up adopting a dog named Shadow, and that dog knew a lot. So I adopted this dog in Massachusetts, and we moved up here, and this dog was, she looked like the white sled dogs that you see, except she had this big chest. She was about 75 pounds, and she was a smart dog, and she had this just killer sense of humor. Like, if you were ski touring with her really fast downhill, she would suddenly just turn to the left. She'd anchor like she was going to brace for you to go into a crevasse, and just totally wipe you out. And if she didn't do that, then her other favorite thing is you're going flying down the hill, and she would just crouch. And now you've gone over her, and it's all over. And then you'd wipe out, you'd get the snow out from behind your glasses, and you'd look at her, and she'd be like, yeah. So that was this dog, and she had a knack for knowing stuff intuitively. Not sure where that came from. So this is a story about Shadow. My friend Robin Henry, who couldn't be here tonight, so anything I say about Robin, she can't negate because she's not here, and me, and this is about a walk in McHugh. So when I first got to Alaska, I thought I knew a lot about outdoor stuff. I'd studied outdoor education in college and done some outward bound instructors and stuff. So I thought I just need to know about avalanches and some river crossings, and I'm good to go. And I don't really need to learn about peer pressure because I've already hurdled that. I'm fine. I thought foolishly that I knew my stuff. No problem. Alaska, piece of cake. And as we've seen, it's not a piece of cake. So I got in the habit with friends of hiking at night after work. So, after work, it's dark, it's winter, and we would go for walks. And this is long before cell phones. So it'd be a Monday, you'd make a plan for a Thursday. And so Rob and I make a plan to go and hike up the backside of McHugh on a Thursday. And my office at Fish and Game had a great view of the Front Range. And in the morning, I looked on Thursday morning, and there were lenticular clouds, and then it started to get snowy and started to get worse. I was like, well, I'll call Robin and we'll bail. Because Robin and I had this sort of motto. We heard people saying, your motto should be summit or die, and ours was sort of like either summit so what or summit or lie. We were not like, you don't have to get to the top. So we'd bailed before, and this seemed like a good time to bail, but I couldn't reach Robin, couldn't reach her. I don't know if she tried to reach me. She's not here, so clearly she didn't try to reach me. And so the plan is to go find her. So I get in the car with Shadow. We drive up into the neighborhoods. This is before there was a decent access point really to the backside of McHugh, but we find each other. And I pull up next to her, and on my way up, I'd heard something on the radio about high winds on the hillside, and I ignored that. But there's like those little pellets of ice that aren't quite snow, and they're not quite hail, but they're something, and they're just slamming against the car. And I pull up next to Robin, and she rolls her window down like 2 inches, and I roll my window down, and then the snow and wind just slams Shadow, who's riding shotgun. I put the window back up. Robin's still sitting in the car. I'm like, okay. So I get on my hat, my goggles, I get outside, I get hammered by snow and wind. I go up, she's got her window open, and I'm like, hey! And she's like, hey! And now I'm standing outside, and she's in a warm car. So I say, great night for a hike. And of course, I'm being sarcastic, right? Doesn't everyone understand sarcasm? Robin's from the Midwest, she doesn't understand sarcasm. So Robin pauses, and then she's like, sure. And she gets out of the car. And I'm like, okay. I've done peer pressure before, but here we go. So I open the door to let Shadow out, and Shadow looks at me, sniffs the wind, and puts her head down. This is a dog that never misses a hike, and she wasn't going. She's like, I'm not getting out of the car. Are you crazy? And I look at her, and here's where I start to be really stupid, and I'm like, let's go. So Shadow reluctantly gets out of the car. We have all those 10 essentials you're supposed to have. We've got crampons, we've got goggles, we've got our beacon probe shovel, all this stuff. We start out hiking, and it's windy. It's just a lousy, lousy day, and it's stupid. Like, we shouldn't be there. It's dark. It's a whiteout condition, but okay, here we go. And we're hiking along, and we get to a spot, and one of us turns to the other and says, maybe we should turn back. And we're screaming at each other, and we're like this close because it's so windy. And it's like, what? And we do this, what? A couple times, so we keep hiking. And we do this about 3 times. And on the 3rd time, we're trying to have this conversation, and Shadow is like knee-butting me to say, let's go. I missed that hint altogether. And so we keep going. It's getting worse and worse. We're like walking wide. It's just a stupid night after work. What are we doing? But here we are. We get up onto this sort of ridgeline-like thing, and we're screaming at each other, and it's like, do you think we should turn around? Well, maybe. Well, what do you think? Well, why don't we find a rock to hide under and have some tea? That was Robin, not me. And so we're having this conversation, and Shadow, who was 75 pounds and was when she stood up, she was pretty big. She gets up and she puts both paws on my shoulders and shoves me and gets down. And I look at her and I don't take the hint. And so I turn to Rob and I'm like, we could have tea. And at that point, Shadow was like, no, we're done here. So Shadow gets up, she shoves me again. And of course, it's windy. I almost wipe out. And then she just starts down the trail. And we see her going down the trail. She's a white dog, all white dog. And we can't see the trail. And it's a whiteout. It's a whiteout. And I don't know where the trail is. And I'm like, let's go. So Rob and I start following Shadow, who's white, and we follow her, and miraculously, this dog takes us right to our cars. And she looks at me in disgust. I open the door. She gets in. She kind of goes, and sits down. And then over the years, she has done this. She did this for me time and time again. I'd come to a river crossing, and she would go up and down to find a decent spot to cross. If we were walking in the woods, she knew when there was a moose in the brush. She was, when snow was unstable, she would stop, and she'd go the other way. She's like, that's bad. Let's go over here. And so over that time of when I was pretty new to Alaska, the Shadow knew, and she taught me how to be a lot more conservative. And so now when I'm hiking and I think, oh, maybe I should do this, I think, the Shadow knows. And I turn around. Thank you very much.
I'll come over on this side. Thank you for that great story. Andy Hall is our next speaker. Andy is the executive director of the Alaska Geographic Association. Born in Sitka, he spent his early years in Mount McKinley National Park, where his father served as superintendent. Andy built a long career as a writer, editor, and publisher at newspapers across Alaska, and for 16 years was the editor and publisher of Alaska Magazine and the general manager of the Milepost. He's the author of Denali's Howl, the deadliest climbing disaster on America's wildest peak. Andy and his wife, Melissa Devon, live in Eagle River. He'll tell us a story about growing up in the 1970s Alaska, hard work, mosquito-filled days fueled by Tang and space sticks. Raise your hand if you know what those are. And how caring for a place makes it yours. Andy.
When I walked up on stage earlier, I introduced myself to Haley, and she said, "You're going last. You better have a banger of a story." So I've completely forgotten what I'm going to say. So I'd just like to thank you for being here tonight. No. Well, I'm not sure if it's a banger, but I'll give it my best shot. The year was 1977. Star Wars was playing at the 4th Avenue Theater. Many of the roads in Anchorage were still dirt. The Trans-Alaska Oil Pipeline was still under construction, and I was about a foot shorter than I am now, at least 50 pounds lighter, and my hair was red. I was a Boy Scout that year, and joining Scouts had really changed my life. As John said, my dad had been a National Park Service employee. His career started in the early 1950s in Sitka, and over the time that he was in the Park Service, he ended up working at and eventually running all of the 4 national parks that existed in Alaska. Sitka, Glacier Bay, Katmai, and his last assignment was Denali, or Mount McKinley as it was known then. And I was fortunate to grow up there, and we lived there for several years. But when the National Park Service decided to transfer my dad to San Francisco to manage the national monuments there, I think my mother drew the line. She said, "We're not leaving." So he left the Park Service. He served a brief stint as the Deputy Director of Alaska State Parks, and then he left park rangering completely. Well, I grew up spending a lot of time outside, and when my dad made this transition, things got a little boring around the house. We did the obligatory car camping, but I felt like something was missing. Well, that changed when I joined Scouts. I was a member of Troop 211 in South Anchorage, and it was a really active troop. While I was there, we hiked the Chilkoot, we floated the Delta River, we paddled the canoe system on the Kenai National Wildlife Refuge, and in the fall we even flew across the inlet and hunted birds. scouting reconnected me with my dad, and it rekindled my love for the outdoors. Now, the other thing we did in Boy Scouts was service projects. And that's where things got interesting, at least for me. So that's why I ended up on a Saturday morning of that same year in the spring on the old Seward Highway behind Potter Marsh. I was there with the Cobra Patrol, of which I was the leader. And we were there to participate in the annual spring cleanup. And we also had an ulterior motive. We wanted to win a bicycle. Now, what 8 guys were going to do with one bicycle, I don't know. I shudder to think what would have happened. But we chose that road because we wanted to maximize the amount of garbage we could pick up. And the way that it worked was for every bag of garbage you turned in, you got a ticket. And the ticket gave you a chance to win one of the bicycles that were distributed all over Anchorage. So we sat and schemed one night in our patrol meeting and decided that that road would be the best. So we got there and we started working our way from Rabbit Creek Road south, and the road did not yield the level of trash we had expected. And the longer we walked, the more dejected we got, until we descended the hill and got to where the road comes right up against the water of the marsh. And there we found a giant roll of visqueen. It was the garbage bonanza we'd been waiting for. We stood there looking at it, trying to figure out how many bags it would fill up. There was even something inside. So we set our collection bags down, and we all got on this plastic and started heaving on it, trying to get it out of the water. We pulled and pulled, and finally the plastic came up, and we pulled it up onto the shoulder. But when the plastic came up, something floated out the other end. And we stood there and looked at it and got real quiet, because what we were looking at was a dead body. It clearly was floating. It was floating just a few feet offshore, face down. We could see that the hands were tied behind its back. And then as we stood there, it slowly rolled over and revealed that, yes, it indeed was a dead body. There were also several gunshot wounds. So we're standing there trying to figure out what we're going to do when a pickup truck drives by. So without even talking to each other, we all turned and ran. Waved this guy down and excitedly told him what we had found. So he pulls over, turns his truck off, walks down to the bank, and he stands there for a long time. I think he smoked an entire cigarette. And then he walked back up and he reached in the window and he pulled out the mic on his CB radio and he called the police. And pretty soon we could hear the sirens coming in the distance. And then we were surrounded by police cars and a couple of fire trucks. All of the garbage we had collected all day was seized as evidence. As the patrol leader, it was my duty to try to convince one of the officers to at least write a note crediting us for the garbage bags. But I got to the point where I thought he was going to handcuff me to his bumper, so I decided to move the patrol up the road, and we made that long, lonely trek back to the Troop 211 headquarters at the old fire station on Rabbit Creek Road, lamenting the lost bicycle. So one of my first experiences with a service project was rather disappointing. But later that summer, one of the other scouts in the troop, a guy named Blaine Smith, who I think is a somewhat notorious trail builder around Anchorage, he called me and he asked me if I would help him with his Eagle project. His idea was that he was going to restore an old trail that had fallen into disuse and try to bring it back to life. Well, having the first experience, I decided I needed to check it out first. So I visited the trail with Blaine one afternoon. It was choked with alders, blocked by fallen trees. There were places where it was washed out. There were other places I couldn't even see where the trail went. But I had nothing on my social calendar that summer, so I decided to go along. So the first day, things got kind of interesting. some of the rangers, I'm not sure Pete might have been there, but I wouldn't be surprised, but some of the state park rangers apparently were debating whether or not to allow the Boy Scouts to use chainsaws. So while the debate was happening, I walked over and picked one up and realized it was almost as big as I was. But as I picked it up, I noticed all the adults looking at me, and they seemed to make a decision very quickly after that. And so I was given a bow saw. And I was told to cut back the alders, take down any trees that I thought I could handle, as long as they were marked for removal. It seemed like I did that for weeks. I eventually graduated to a shovel and a Pulaski, and I was told to harvest any rocks I could find and dig out logs, and the impossible task of trying to dig out alder roots. I stunk like only a teenage boy could, and it was augmented with the chemical smell of bug dope. First off, then cutters, then DEET, and then all three. But no matter what I slathered all over myself, the bugs never let up. They harried me the entire summer. My sustenance that summer was watered down Tang and space food sticks. Now, John's the first other person I've ever heard of who remembers those, but they were a snack product allegedly developed by NASA to feed astronauts as they explored outer space. I happen to have been obsessed with space and astronauts at that point in my life. So I convinced my parents that this was all I would need to fuel my hard labor that summer. So one day my mom told me to jump into the station wagon, and we drove down to the Prairie Market, which was it was the 1970s version of Costco. And we picked up a case of these things, maybe two, and I ate them all summer long. I don't know what they were made of, but as far as I can recall, it was a mixture of peanut butter and sawdust. It was very effective as roughage. But having experienced the nutritional impact of space food sticks, I remain completely convinced that the moon landing was a hoax. I worked harder that summer than I ever had in my life. Before that, I thought cutting the grass was hard work. I learned that shared suffering brings camaraderie. And I started to realize that despite how miserable I was, we were starting to make progress. The trail was starting to come back to life. I ended up, I don't recall how far we pushed the trail that summer. It seemed like it went on forever. But by the fall, Blaine had earned his Eagle badge. And much to the surprise of myself and a lot of other people, I put together my own Eagle project, and I got my own Eagle badge the following year. In the years after that, whenever I drive south, whether I was going down to work as a commercial fisherman or just to go down and rock climb on the walls along the highway, I couldn't help but look up at that trail and think about that summer. When I got married and I started a family, every time we went south to go camping, I would point up at the hillside as we passed the end of Potter Marsh, and I would tell my kids the story of the time that I went into the woods as a scrawny runt, and I came out slightly less scrawny because I had actually worked for the first time. Today my kids are out of college. They're both living in the lower 48. And when I go south, I'm either with my wife, who will not allow me to tell that story anymore, or I'm alone. But I can tell you that every time I drive by, I look up at that hillside and I think about that summer, and I think about it with more than a little bit of pride, because I know that that trail remains open and it remains a very popular hiking trail for Anchorage folks that like to get out in the woods. So I sometimes try to think about what it is that I learned all those years ago. It's almost 50 years. I learned that hard work is more than just completing a task, that public service is a big part of that. It's not glamorous. It's often dirty and sweaty. If you're doing it in Alaska, it's probably going to be accompanied by a cloud of hungry mosquitoes. But you roll your sleeves up and you do the work, and somehow the place gets under your skin. And that work that I did that summer still impacts who I am. Today, I'm the executive director of a nonprofit that connects people with public lands, grounded in the belief that when you invest time and talent and money into a public land, they become less abstract, they become real, and they become yours. And that trail that runs off the end of Potter's Marsh and winds among the rocks and the trees above the cliffs along the highway is certainly mine. Thank you.
Okay, this last poem is for the kids. I hope there's still some kids out there. I heard them earlier. I wrote this for a little friend of mine who was 4 at the time. She's now 8. Her name is Malin, and I wrote it for her because her grandmother, who's a good friend of mine, whom she calls Nana, told her, like a good Swede, that the forests are full of little people called tomtins, and they run around in their little red hats and their little black boots, and they are the cutest things in the world, but it's very hard to see them. So this is the poem, The Little People. It's in the tumble thick they hide, shading their glassine eyes. Our dog inhales their wood smoke scent, growls at the hollow beneath a snowy branch, sparkling with diamond dust. They toss about when tipple-mongering, something no one has seen, only the rings made by their shoe pins. Nana says they are shy, full of witty bits, prone to laugh and cry at once. Speech like bird riddle and wind tingle. We heard one cross behind us once, spray of powder in his wake. Nana says it's good luck to spot them. They freeze, eyes wide, fingers all aflutter. We were tizzy with wonderment, amazed. We almost saw what should not be seen in the green dark forest on a snowy evening under a blue and twinkling moon. That's it.
Let's get one more round of applause for all of our storytellers tonight. It takes a lot of bravery to get up on stage and tell a vulnerable story or a funny story. And thankfully, we have the most supportive, friendly audience at our Trail Tales events every month. So thanks so much to all of you for coming out tonight. Huge thanks to Chugach Park Fund for being our partner this month and our partner for years. Funding trail work in Chugach State Park. Alaska Trails would certainly not be doing the work we do in Chugach State Park without Chugach Park Fund's funding. So as you're out enjoying the trails, whenever it warms up, just remember that the funding comes from awesome volunteers like Chugach Park Fund, and if you see a hungry young trail worker who perhaps needs a little bit of tang or a little bit of space food, just know that they might be funded by the Chugach Park Fund in their endeavors of becoming slightly less scrawny by the end of the summer. So thanks so much for being here. We really appreciate it. Have a great night. Stay warm, and we'll see you in the fall. Happy winter, spring.